The film, based on real events, begins with a white car driving through the streets of a nighttime city and then starting to chase a black car in a dimly lit area. The driver of the white car speeds up and crashes into the trunk of the black car. The driver of the car in front gets out and immediately takes photos of the damage for the insurance company. The driver of the white car also steps out and suddenly plunges a knife into the man's stomach. The villain shoves the poor guy into his own car, kills him with a knife, and flees the scene. August 2005. Two police officers stand in traffic on a hot day, listening to the news on the radio about a series of brutal murders, including the one at the beginning of the film. One of the cops, Detective Dong-seok, gets out of the car, tells some local thugs to calm down, and heads toward an illegal gambling hall. A security guard tries to stop him and even stuffs some bills into his pocket, which Dong-seok absolutely dislikes. He arrests the cashier for illegal money exchange. Meanwhile, Mafia boss Jang Dong-soo is training with a punching bag when his subordinate enters and tells him about the incident at the gambling hall. The gangster orders the punching bag to be unzipped, and from it falls a beaten, bloodied man. He calls a corrupt police captain and tells him to rein in his officer, who is interfering with the gambling business. Dong-soo gets into the back seat of a car, and the driver starts moving, accompanied by two other cars escorting the mafia boss. Dong-seok forces the arrested man to take him to the crime scene on his scooter. The cop handcuffs the offender to the scooter and approaches the black car while the guy tries to escape. Dong-seok and his partner examine the crime scene and notice that the black car's bumper is damaged. Meanwhile, Dong-soo negotiates with another gangster, Hyo Sang-do, who is unhappy that Dong-soo controls all the underground gambling in the city while he gets mere scraps. Bodyguards interfere in the boss's conversation. Dong-soo doesn't like this, so he punches his subordinate and rips out two of Sang-do's henchmen's teeth with his bare hands. After this gruesome display, Sang-do has no more questions. At the police station, the cops try to determine the motives for the murder, as the victim had no enemies or debts. Dong-seok is convinced they are dealing with a serial killer because the patterns are similar. It appears the same knife was used in 3 murders over the past month. However, some detectives believe it could have been a robbery. The captain takes the opportunity to reprimand Dong-seok for raiding the gangster-run gambling hall without orders. The detective responds that he is simply catching criminals. Dong-soo dismisses his bodyguard, saying he will drive home himself, and gets behind the wheel. As he opens the car door, he sees that a white car has crashed into the rear bumper of his vehicle. It's the same one from the beginning of the film. Dong-soo says he won't call the cops, wanting to just get back in and drive away. But the maniac suddenly runs up behind him and stabs him twice. However, the mafia boss is not an easy target. He manages to take the knife from the killer and wounds him. The villain jumps into his car, runs over Dong-soo, and quickly disappears into the night. An ambulance picks up the gangster, and he undergoes emergency surgery at the hospital. His gang assumes Sang-do is behind the attack and brutally beats his men. Meanwhile, the maniac destroys the bloodstains on his knife and treats his wound. He immediately looks for a new victim and coldly murders an old man near his home. Dong-soo regains consciousness and tells his bodyguard that the attacker is not from the criminal underworld. He writes down part of the white sedan's license plate that he managed to remember and orders it to be found. Dong-seok visits the gangster to get details of the attack, but Dong-soo refuses to cooperate with the cops. The detective examines the mafia boss's car and sees the same damage on the rear bumper as the previous victim's car. Dong-seok goes to his captain and insists they stop covering for Dong-soo and interrogate him thoroughly about the attack, since he saw the maniac's face. The chief doesn't like the detective's tone and kicks him out of his office. The killer arrives at a gas station and buys a cup of coffee from a vending machine. He approaches a truck driver, who was unlucky enough to be there, and slaughters him with his long knife. The maniac gets into the victim's truck and drives off. Suddenly, a second driver, who was sleeping behind the curtain in the cab, wakes up. The killer smirks, attacks the man, and gives him no chance of survival. During the struggle, the knife flies out the window and lands on the roadside. Based on Dong-soo's description, a woman sketches a portrait of the attacker, which turns out to be very similar to the killer's face. The gangster gives the portrait to his bodyguard and orders him to find the maniac before the police do. Dong-seok visits the mafia boss again, threatening to shut down his illegal gambling business unless he talks about the attacker. The cop explains that they are dealing with a very dangerous killer and that there will soon be more victims. However, Dong-soo remains unconvinced. Soon, the bodyguard admits to Dong-soo that things are getting worse because the attack has spread rumors, damaging his reputation. Realizing he needs to find and kill the maniac to restore his influence, the gangster's men locate the killer's abandoned car and the knife by the roadside. Dong-seok summons Tae-seok and shares some information about the maniac. He gives the detective the villain's portrait and adds that he only kills at night. The mafia boss suggests they share information to catch the scumbag faster. He also needs police databases to identify the killer's DNA and possibly his identity. Dong-seok declares that if the cops find the killer first, they can lock him up. But if the gangsters get to him first, he's finished. Now, the cop and the gangster are working together to catch the devil. However, Dong-seok secretly records their conversation on a voice recorder, just in case. Tae-seok tells his partner and another detective that the gangsters will help them catch the killer. Meanwhile, Dong-seok is confident that with the cops' help, they will find the villain and then eliminate him. Additionally, the gangster decides to get rid of Sung-kyu, who has become too arrogant after the attack. He gives a trusted associate the killer's knife and orders him to use it to take out his rival. The henchman successfully completes the task and leaves the maniac's knife at the crime scene. Dong-seok hands over the killer's white sedan to Tae-seok, where the detective finds hair and blood from multiple victims, confirming that the same person was behind all the murders. Forensic experts also find the DNA of several victims on the knife. Tae-seok realizes that Dong-seok ordered Sung-kyu's murder and deliberately left the knife at the crime scene. The cop confronts the gangster, but the well-trained thug easily overpowers him. Tae-seok vows that after catching the killer, he will go after Dong-seok and then leaves. News reports on TV announce that a special investigative team has been brought in to solve the serial killer case. In a diner, the maniac learns about Sung-kyu's murder from the news. A guy nearby looks at the killer with confusion. The maniac realizes he spoke his thoughts out loud. He places a hand on the young man's shoulder and walks outside. The villain attends Sung-kyu's funeral, blending into the crowd, and smirks while watching Dong-seok from afar. The killer approaches a bodyguard of the deceased gangster and hands him a note that reads, "Sung-kyu was killed with my knife, but not by my hand," then glances at Dong-seok. Tae-seok and Dong-seok decide to inspect the white sedan once again and find a bloodstain on the steering wheel that could belong to the maniac. Suddenly, Sung-kyu's thugs burst into the garage and attack the cop and the gangster. In the fight, the two of them take down all the gangsters. Dong-seok brutally deals with several thugs, while Tae-seok kills Sung-kyu's bodyguard with his own knife. The cop screams in frustration, realizing that he has now become a murderer himself, while the gangster calmly remarks that he will clean up the place. Later, Tae-seok spots the killer on the street, recognizing him from Dong-seok's portrait, and chases after him with his colleagues through the city streets. Unfortunately, the villain manages to escape. The detectives find out that the maniac recently ate at a diner and start searching for the bottle he drank from to get his fingerprints. Tae-seok enlists the help of a forensic expert to determine the criminal's identity. Meanwhile, Dong-seok looks for new business partners to restore his former influence. The forensic expert informs Tae-seok that a fingerprint on the white sedan steering wheel matches that of a young man who disappeared 3 months ago. The cop decides to follow this lead. He visits the house the young man rented before his disappearance. The landlady describes him as a well-mannered tenant who always paid his rent on time. Tae-seok searches the room where the man lived and finds many strange objects. He sees a photo of the tenant, compares it to Dong-seok's portrait, and realizes that this is the killer. Tae-seok informs the other detectives and Dong-seok about his discovery. The cops and gangsters take the photo and begin combing the city for the villain. They search street by street, house by house, but unfortunately, without success. Dong-seok waits for Tae-seok outside in the rain. The gangster takes pity on a schoolgirl soaked to the bone and gives her his umbrella. The gangsters and cops decide to take a break and grab a meal at a cafe. Their attention is drawn to breaking news on TV, reporting that the girl Dong-seok gave his umbrella to was brutally murdered. The gangster realizes that the maniac is mocking them and orders his men to continue the search. They spot the villain in a car and start chasing him. Dong-seok rams the killer's vehicle with his own car, also hitting Tae-seok's car in the process. The maniac tries to escape, but Dong-seok's bodyguard catches up with him. A fight breaks out. The killer pulls out a knife and kills the gangster. Dong-seok finds the villain trying to hide in a karaoke bar. He beats him mercilessly and takes him to his hideout. The gangster is about to behead the murderer. Tae-seok suddenly runs over Dong-seok with his car. While the gangster lies unconscious, the cop arrests the villain and takes him to the police station. Unfortunately, the prosecution does not have enough evidence to sentence the murderer to death. Tae-seok persuades Dong-seok to testify against the killer under the condition that they will be placed in the same prison. Dong-seok appears in court and gives a detailed account of the events, not forgetting to mention the scar on the villain's chest from their fight. The killer ends up in the same prison as Dong-seok, and the gangster clearly has no intention of waiting for the execution of the death sentence. How did you like the movie The Gangster, the Cop, the Devil? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.